Imagine living your life after 50 and feeling energized and excited about your future. Welcome to the Women in the Middle podcast, the podcast for women who are ready to figure out what they want and create the life they deserve. Here's your host and master certified life coach, Susie Rosenstein.
Hey there, today we're talking about going from being afraid to change anything in your life to earning a motorcycling land speed record, becoming a powerlifting champion, and publishing a first book. Let's go. Welcome to the podcast Women in the Middle with over 2 million downloads and counting. I am so grateful that the podcast world has brought us together. Thank you so much for tuning in to the show. Women in the Middle is all about getting unstuck, clear, and excited about leading your next chapter, especially if you're in your 50s and 60s and starting to feel just how precious time really is. I know you can relate to that. I'm your host, Susie Rosenstein, your Master Certified Coach, Midlife Life Leadership Mentor, and Certified Zentangle Teacher. And as always, I know you're going to love my guest because we're talking about fear and courage, everyone's favorite topic at our age, right? I don't know about you, but I was pretty shocked when I realized how much I had been letting fear run the show in my life for decades. It was so eye-opening for me because I didn't really think of myself that way. So there's the awareness, and then there's the shift into doing your life differently on purpose. And that's what you'll hear today with some pretty surprising twists to boot. But first, just quick, I want to tell you about a new call that I'm offering. It's called the Autopilot Audit, and it's perfect for you if you're noticing that you're starting to feel time differently. You got the memo. Time is flying by. But even though you're capable, responsible, and productive, your days may be starting to feel a little repetitive, kind of predictable, kind of blah. And quite frankly, a little too same old for your liking. Yes, even though you're busy and checking all the boxes, it can still happen. So the Autopilot Audit will help you get clear insight into what's actually happening, a sharper understanding of what you want, and a grounded recommendation for your next step. It's like a structured mirror on your life, what's really going on. So I'm super committed to this because time really does matter now more than ever. And my friend, sleepwalking through the privilege of aging, that's not your style. So if you're ready to identify where you may be running on default instead of decision, book your Autopilot Audit at www.talktosusie.com. All right, I am thrilled to welcome Louisa Swaden to the podcast. Louisa is living proof that the second half of life can be the start of something extraordinary. After turning 50, she began saying yes to things that once felt impossible, like setting land speed records on sand, racing at the legendary Bonneville Salt Flats, and riding across Namibia as part of a conservation effort with Rally for Rangers. She became a UK ambassador for the Global Women Riders World Relay, a movement that united thousands of women through the shared freedom of motorcycling, and also earned a Welsh powerlifting record along the way. Most recently, she turned author, weaving together mindset, motorcycles, and philosophy in her debut book, The Stoic Rider. Under the name The Existential Biker, Louisa shares raw, reflective insights drawn from the road, exploring what it means to live bravely, age boldly, and lean into life's unknowns. When she's not writing or exploring on two wheels, she can be found reading sci-fi, musing on the universe, or laughing with her grandchildren. Her story reminds us that life doesn't have to shrink with age. It can expand in thrilling, unexpected directions. As she says, where you look is where you go. Louisa's story has been featured on Adventure Rider Radio, BBC, Adventure Bike TV on Amazon Prime, and Under the Visor. She is written as a featured writer on Overland Magazine and Motorcycle Sport and Leisure Magazine, where her viral story of becoming a breast milk delivering biker for the NHS to bring life-saving milk to premature babies was told. I can't wait for you to meet Louisa. She's one of a kind, so buckle up and please enjoy. Hi, Louisa. Thanks so much for joining us today on the Women in the Middle podcast.
Well, thank you so much for having me, Susie.
Well, we have been having a lovely little chat without recording, so we are all set. And Louisa was getting into too much good stuff, so I had to say, please stop. We must get busy with the episode.
I know. I'm just so passionate about this, Susie, like you are. And with so many things in common that I'm really just so happy to be talking to you today, with or without the recording.
Oh, thank you. This is the best part of my job, is meeting cool people that I would never meet before, right? Not only are you in the UK, but we have very different lives. Like you're not gonna catch me on a motorcycle.
Well, maybe by the end of the episode.
I'll never say never. I'll never say never. Okay, let's start by you talking a little bit about what was going on for you in your 40s and why you were looking to make a change. Because I know from your notes, it was pretty dramatic when it comes to health.
Yeah. Yes. So I guess, how would you describe my 40s? Stuck. I think stuck. I was in a reasonable job. It was quite a nice, well-paid corporate job. And I got to travel and meet people. But, I felt there was something missing. And especially as I got to the second half of my 40s, when my children started to grow up, and, well, as they grow up, we're thinking of families of their own because they were already grown, but they were thinking of families of their own and just about to start them. And they'd left home because both my children left home quite young. I suddenly realized that this just wasn't my life. I wasn't living the life that I was meant to live. And yet, like so many people, change frightened me. Change put the fear of God into me, because I didn't know anything outside of this identity that I'd created for myself, which was mother and worker. And pretty much that was it. To change everything and to answer this call inside me was such a drastic turnaround that I kind of stuffed it down, and I just put it down to the possibility that maybe I was going through some hormonal changes. Maybe, I was just a bit crazy to be thinking that there was anything else out there for me.
And I want to ask you about your experience with fear, because I was stuck for 5 years. For me, it was between 45 and 50, like you, the latter half of the 40s. And I was surprised when I started to realize how scared I was. Were you aware of a tendency to be fearful in situations like that?
I think for change in particular was quite scary for me, because I lost my parents quite young, and security was very important to me. And I was in a relationship. It was a settled relationship. And the change I was thinking of would involve change in that as well. So that would made me very fearful. Yes. So that kind of made me feel stuck. And it made me, for quite some years, probably about 5 years, actually, if I think about from the time that I started to be anxious, made me fearful of doing anything different. So I'd kept to the same routines. But I noticed in myself, my happiness levels had dropped quite significantly. And I was really just coasting through life. And I don't know about you, but I started to get some aches and pains at that time as well. And it just felt like there was a knot inside me that whatever I did wouldn't go away. And I would usually drink a glass or two of wine in the evening to make that not go away. And I realized afterwards that was really just covering up the symptoms and not dealing with the root cause, which is unfortunately how often alcohol comes into play, right?
Yeah.
And I didn't want to be that person. I really didn't. So I guess the fear for me was was change. It was just, this isn't my life. What is my life? I wasn't quite sure at that time. And how do I get from A to B, then to C?
Yeah. Oh my gosh, I relate to so much of what you said. So my parents also passed when I was young. And I definitely was aware of that when I started to make my first round of big girl decisions in my 20s and 30s. When I got married, I made sure I married stability. I remember thinking about it that way. I wanted stability. And really, I think I wanted what so many of us want, which is certainty, which doesn't exist, but we like to think it exists, don't we?
We do. Oh, yeah.
Oh my gosh, we love to think it's a real.
We do.
Yeah. So, so that's pretty powerful that you're realizing and so many of us don't know what it is that we want, which is also being in this field now for over 10 years. I'm still surprised by it because we think that if we were happy, things would be clear. If we just felt better about stuff and had more clarity, things would be hunky dory. And having more clarity is absolutely part of the process. But being clear about what it is that you want, it can be so challenging just because it's trying to tap in desires. There's still so many things that get in the way for our ability to tap in. And were you struggling with that too? It's like, yeah, I need change, but I don't know what it is.
Yeah. Oh, I could totally relate to that. You're right, because we just don't know. I think our heads get so busy with the routine and of life. And especially if you've just sort of shipped your kids off and you've got all of this space and time, and it gets filled with minutiae. It gets filled with things that maybe, shouldn't be there, bad habits perhaps. And I think that is just our kind of coping mechanism at the time. So yeah, we just get bogged down, and life doesn't really reveal itself except in little ways. I found that, say, my body was reacting to not answering the call, not answering the purpose. And I knew that. Wow. So I was listening. I didn't realize it until later when I read a book. Have you ever read Martha Beck, Finding Your Own North Star? She talks about the body being the compass. And I read that recently and I thought, oh, she got it exactly right. Because when you're aligned with your purpose, your body feels lighter and you've got energy and you'll feel expansive and open and wide. When you're against your purpose, because you get this restrictive feeling, everything feels small and there's anxiety and your cortisol goes up and stress. And this is what was happening to me at the late 40s, I guess. And I didn't know it. So question is, how do we find that? For me, I knew I wanted adventure in my life.
Now, why did you know that? Why did you know that? Because again, was that something new for you?
Yes. Except for when I was a child. So when I was a kid, I was Enid Blyton all the way, and I would be out there climbing trees, making bow and arrows. I really loved the whole idea of scraped knees and just going somewhere you'd never been before, getting lost and finding your way back, making your own, digging holes and just hiding. I was into adventure with a big A. And I believe firmly that the person that you were as a child is who you are. I think Martha calls it your essential self. It's who you were meant to be before society layers on all this. Oh, you should study for this. You should, this is the course of life. Find someone, settle down, have kids. And you were told if you were into singing or drawing, you would think, well, that's not a proper career, You put that away.
Not what I should be doing.
Exactly.
That's
so you put those things away. Exactly. Yeah. There's me on a bike riding around, having all this fun. And then all of that kind of got put to one side to develop this career. And I remembered, in my 40s, I remembered that joy that arose in me when I was cycling around town and having friends and just getting up to mischief a bit. And I wanted to recreate that. So
You're
the first thing I thought
with
was
the cycling and the mischief.
Adventure, yeah.
Cycling and mischief. I would not say that about my childhood. That's fascinating. And I have a great worksheet that I'm going to put in the show notes about this. It's called Passion Project 50, and it's a guided walk through your life according to chapters defined by you, looking for moments of joy. So a lot of times we describe, our past, our childhood, by traumatic events, or the time that we moved, or when our parents got divorced, or when we had a terrible teacher, or the year we didn't have friends, something like that. So this is an exercise just to look for moments of joy. Oh. And then at the end of it, you look at it all and you look if there's any patterns, and ask yourself, do I have any of this stuff in my life now? And if you don't, you're invited to bring some of that stuff in. And that is how I discovered tap dancing, because I completely forgot how much I enjoyed that when I was 13, 14. And of course, I didn't remember it at all because that's when my father died when I was 12, just around then. And it was the girl that I tap danced with. We had semi-private lessons, and she brought it up to me on Facebook once. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I totally forgot that. And I discovered a bunch of things like that. And I thought, wow, that really gave me a lot of joy. My clients have found so many interesting things to just be curious about and explore. It doesn't mean that I need to make a career out of tap dancing, but there was something. Was it the rhythm? Was it the music? Was it the movement? Because I wouldn't sign up for any other dance class, but there was something special about the taps. And I think it was because I played in marching bands and jazz bands for ages, and playing saxophone as part of my growing up. But anyway, I'm going to put that in the show notes. The link is SusieRosenstein.com/Passion Project 50. It's a great little exercise. And I'm not surprised, Louisa, that you brought it up, because what I'm sensing is we have a lot in common.
Oh, we are. I think we're kind of like sisters, soul sisters coming on here. It's great.
I think so too.
Yeah.
Cycling and mischief. So tell me, when you think about cycling and mischief in your childhood, and then compare it to where you were at when you started to see that.
Yeah.
What did you notice? How did you feel?
Oh, I was flat, really. I think the best way to describe it. I was flat. I didn't have mischief in my life, and I didn't have anything with two wheels. So it was just a very typical kind of suburban lifestyle. And that, I guess, is probably why, I took to having a couple of glasses of wine a night, because that numbed that feeling of emptiness.
Yeah.
But it wasn't who I wanted to be at all. And little by little, it just kept on creeping up at me. I would become probably not the nicest person to be with either. Ratty, perhaps a little, sort of more emotional. And I think back, and kind of it's clearer to me, even now, that's probably the first time I've ever said that, to be honest with you. But I acknowledge that I was probably not the joy and life and soul of any relationship or party. So those things kind of conspired to depress me. I was never clinically depressed. I was just joyless. And I was, it made me sad, and I just didn't want to be that way anymore.
Now, did you have anybody in your life who was kind of a role model for an alternative lifestyle? Like, what I'm noticing, I've interviewed so many people over the last 8 years, and sometimes, when I think about my childhood, I think, before my parents died and everything, it was pretty traditional like yours. I didn't have entrepreneurs in the family. They had like obvious professions that people can easily find a job because you have that title, that kind of thing. And I've met so many people, and when they have entrepreneurial parents or entrepreneurs in their life, that mindset tends to open people up and exposes them to a wider variety of experiences. And then I've also had one guest who had a big epiphany about adventure. And I will link this in the show notes as well. When her kids went to university, she got jealous. She felt envy. It was envy more than jealous. She felt envy that her kids were having adventures and she wasn't. So were you seeing anything? Because I also craved adventure. And I think the first adventurous thing I did was to move to Canada. But I moved because of a guy when I was 19. It ended up being a great decision. Whatever, for different, that's why I did it, but it ended up really being like an adventure. And I never had anything like that before, but I also didn't have a lot of adventurous role models. So were you seeing any of that coming up in your life?
It's a great question. And the answer is no, I didn't actually have any, apart from, kind of heroes on big screen. I was a big fan of people like Steve McQueen. Whatever, I just used to I love watching any films with him in it. So I didn't really have, because my father wasn't around, I didn't have him as a role model. I had people who I respected, and my last husband was that, and also bosses. They are very important, bosses and teachers are really important because they can bring out the best in people. But the adventure thing, I think, was just in me from a young child. And I think losing my father and my mother, although she was around for a little bit longer, unfortunately, she suffered with Great Depression. So she wasn't really in my life. So I took care of myself for much of my teens. And that developed this kind of a resilience, I guess, in me. I knew that I needed to take care of myself. And in fact, I'd always had that resilience because as a very, very young child, I remember being in the school playground. I must have been 6 at the time. And some kids had decided, as kids do, that they didn't want to play with me anymore. So I sat down against a wall and I watched them. And I remember these very words. I said to myself, don't worry, because I'll always be your best friend. And then I told my voice, I said, but you won't remember this conversation. And my voice said, I promise you I will. And I've always remembered that. And that simple conversation, that young, I think set me on the tone of my life to, I'll always take care of me, I'll always be there for me. So when I've really needed it, when I had to forge my own path, that little Lou, as I call her, has always been by my side. I think that's really helped me, and it stopped me going anywhere black, from any of life's experiences.
What a beautiful story! My goodness, that you had that ability to watch yourself think at a young age.
I know, and I hope that's. I think nowadays we are a little bit more aware. I know my grandchildren. I've got 3 grandchildren, 7, 8, and 9, and I know they are more emotionally aware. And they are given emotional lessons in how to handle their emotions. Things have changed a lot since we were kids. Yeah, they are. And you know what? Unlike many people, I'm a little optimistic about the generation that's coming up because they are being told how to keep safe. They are being told to honor their body and to honor themselves. And I think that their parents, my children, for example, they also understand, the right way to talk to a child so that the child doesn't blame him or herself. So, I'm slightly an aside, but yeah, I'm a bit more optimistic about kids and that generation coming through. So just the way I like to be.
I love that. I just love that. Okay, so now you have some clarity that you want an adventure, but you don't know what it's going to be like. So what the heck?
Exactly.
I know you ended up on a sabbatical. How did that all work?
Yes. So I'll tell you that the thing just before the sabbatical, there was a really important turning point for me. And we talked about this a little off air, that point where you realize that things have to change and you take that step. And it is often just a moment in time, isn't it? A split second. So for me, it started when I went to the doctor about a pain in my elbow. I think it's kind of a tennis elbow. And I thought, I don't want to keep drinking like this. I want something to calm my nerves, though. So I went to the doctor and I told him about my elbow, and he just prescribed whatever it was. And then I went to the door handle, and just like Columbo, I stopped and I turned around and I said, I don't suppose you could have something for anxiety, do you? And he did something very special, which I thank him to this day every time I tell this story, and I hope other doctors do the same. He said, come back and sit down. Put his pen down, swiveled his chair, and he said, now, what really is the problem? Can you believe that?
That's amazing.
And this was like a 10-minute consultation. There were people in the waiting room, which I still apologize to for this day. And we'd had our time, but he made me sit down. And I told him, I want to make a change in my life, but I'm frightened to. I don't have the courage. My children, even though they were adults, I said, I just don't want to put them through this. And he just said, look, this won't go away. And your children love you. If you are kind of carry on pushing this down and neglecting your needs, you'll make yourself very ill. And that they wouldn't want that. And like a penny dropping, it just suddenly occurred to me that he was absolutely right.
Wow.
And that very evening, that same evening, I spoke to my husband and I said, I'm afraid things have to change radically. And then the next morning, I spoke to the kids. So it had to happen as quickly as that. I couldn't let doubt sink back in because I knew in my heart it was absolutely right. And I knew that I also wanted to set a good example to my children about how you must also honor yourself and look after yourself and your own needs.
So what's so fascinating about that is that you were aware that something had to change, but there was still a disconnect between that awareness and you taking action. But the way he was so open to listening and to honor what it is you had to say, that helped you open up, it sounds like. And then you heard the information differently. Do you think it was because it was from a physician?
I think so. I think it was because, you can sometimes tell a stranger a little bit more. Well, not quite a stranger, but I don't go to the doctor very often. So he wasn't an acquaintance of mine. I was just a name to him. And I think that act of getting it out, speaking it out loud, just crystallized it for me. And it made it easier because I thought I was here getting unbiased, good advice. And there's also something called, I think, a white coat syndrome, where we do listen to people in authority. But he was gentle, he was kind, and he was to the point, and I knew I could trust him. And I thought,
great story. Thank you so much for sharing that, because it's such a trick. This is why I love asking these questions about behavior change and really zoning into that moment. Because as I mentioned, I was stuck for 5 years. So even though I was getting some good advice, it wasn't landing and I wasn't ready. And I don't know. Sometimes it's just when you hear it, or there's a little tweak in the way the idea comes to you, or how you feel that day when you think that thought. Like, there's so many reasons. But there it was. And then that set you on a course, and you took pretty quick action. Like, you started to make
very
decisions.
quick.
Wow.
Yes. So the very next thing I did after that was ask for a sabbatical, because I thought, I'm going to need time. I'm going to need time to plan an adventure. But I didn't know what it was going to entail. So this now came the fun part, right? And I actually composed an adventure which was based on my love of the ocean. So I had recently learned, I got a day skipper qualification and a competent crew qualification, which meant that I could help sail a yacht. And I knew that I loved being on the ocean, seeing wildlife at sea, just beautiful. So I thought, let's make that part of it. And I knew that although I hadn't ridden a big bike ever, because I'd actually passed my motorcycle test back when I was 23, 22. And I thought, that's great. I've got that now. I can ride a bigger bike instead of this sort of 125cc bike. But 2 weeks later, I found out I was pregnant. I know. So
my
that
gosh,
meant,
my jaw just dropped.
And I thought, well, that's it. I'm not going to get on a bike because there's just too much at stake now. I had my child, but after that, just mummy duties meant that I was just not available to be a motorcyclist anymore. It wasn't working out for me. So that was all shelved. And then suddenly I got to this point where I think I heard a radio program talk about motorcycle tours across America on Harley Davidsons. And I thought, that sounds incredible. That's something Steve McQueen would do. So I thought, you know what, I'm gonna book that. I'm gonna do the sailing. And then I thought, I really want to see the Panama Canal. Because my part of my corporate life was, in fact, most of it was in the maritime industry. And I'd learned a lot about big ships and some of the structures, the locks and the passages that they pass through. And the Panama Canal was just incredible feat of engineering. If you've never looked into it, it's a fascinating story. And it was being widened, and I thought, I'm going to go to Panama and go and see that. Have a little wander around a rainforest, as you do.
Yes.
And then I'll see what I feel like doing after that. So I planned this thing where I would fly to Las Vegas, pick up a motorbike. It ended up being similar to a Harley, but something called an Indian Scout, which is very nice. It's what Anthony Hopkins rode in The World's Fastest Indian, which is a fabulous film. If you've never watched it, real tearjerker. Oh, it's a real tearjerker. So I got on an Indian Scout, rode all the way to San Francisco, and then down through Death Valley, Mammoth Lakes, then right down to California. And that was an incredible experience. But
By yourself or with a group?
No, I was with a group. Uh-huh. So that was amazing, but I was really, really fearful during that trip because I had these ideas and they're all gung-ho. Apart from the sailing where I'd skilled up, I hadn't actually sat on a powerful bike for 20 odd years.
Oh my God.
And I wasn't prepared for the power and I wasn't confident. So it was quite good that I was in a group. And it's quite good because the American roads are quite wide and easy to ride. And we all rode in formation. So it was possible and not impossible. But even that was hard. And a couple of days, I nearly gave up. I remember thinking when I got into the hotel room, that was the hardest thing I've ever done. I'm never going to do it again.
And how old
and
were
then
you?
the next morning, I was about 48 at the time. Yeah.
So
48,
this is within
49.
the sabbatical period. And you're still pregnant during this.
Sorry. This was in my sabbatical. But no. I'd had my kids in my 20s, early 20s.
Okay.
And they'd grown up. Yeah. Okay. So the reason I made this adventure was when I went to the doctor and he told me I needed to do something about it. And the kids were grown up by now and, planning their own children. So this was the time. This was my time. So
totally. This was totally your time.
Yeah. But I needed this push. So that part of the journey was set. And then I flew down after that, finished in Los Angeles. And I flew to Panama. Saw the canal being widened, which was fabulous. Then I flew over to Guadeloupe and I got on a sailboat with another 3 people and we sailed across the Atlantic. We went all the way via Bermuda. And then we went north up to New York. And that was fabulous. That was a fabulous journey.
Was this a unihull? You were sailing?
Yes. And there was just 4 of us crewing. So we had like nights where you have 4 on, 4 off, 4 hours on, 4 hours off. Some amazing scenery, some moments of pure bliss, solitude in the ocean, moments of danger, moments of clarity. And I arrived back in New York just thinking, wow, what an adventure I've had. But I wanted to go home then. I wanted to see my family. But when I got back, I realized that the thing that had made a biggest impression on me was the motorcycling. And I think what it had to do with was this community that I found. The people that I'd met were just incredible. There's a community around motorcycling, which is almost like a built-in family. If you're in trouble, side of the road, and you've got a bike, you almost get annoyed by the amount of people that stop to try and help you. Annoyed is the wrong word, but it's there. And that community has helped me every step of the way since, into everything I've ever achieved since that moment in time has been because of this community.
Well, Louisa, what you're saying is so interesting. One of the things I talk about all the time on this show is that the most important thing to do is take the next best step. Don't get hung up on having to know about what's going to happen after you take the next best step, or what's going to happen in 2 years and how it's going to develop over the next 10 years. It's impossible to know. And this is such a great example because you tried a few things that you really wanted to do. And one of them really made an impression on you in a way that, I don't know, were you maybe even surprised? Were you surprised that this was the thing?
Yeah, I was, because I was actually very, very scared of it. And,
exactly.
Going fast was,
you can't anticipate it. And then the other thing that's so beautiful about your experience, another thing that you couldn't have anticipated, was the importance and power of being with like-minded people and having community, that sense of belonging. You can't anticipate when you're doing new things, novel things. You just don't know what's going to happen. You don't know who you're going to meet. You don't know what conversation you're going to have. You don't know what you're going to think. You just don't know. It's impossible. So one of the things that's so important, I find, is to get yourself in a space where you're open to being curious about your own process. It's not all about just figuring out the plan. What if the journey of experiencing the plan was as important, if not more important, than getting the clarity about the goal or completing one of your early goals, but that the journey, that was just as joyful and just as meaningful, because we dropped the productivity, blah, 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 that's going on in our minds all the time. Is this productive enough? Am I being productive? Blah, blah, blah. It just goes on and on. We're so hard on ourselves. But what if you just relaxed into, wow, what do I love about this? What don't I love about this? What am I learning about myself doing this thing? So for you to do something that was so scary, and honestly, I'm scared just thinking, what is she going to say next? Because this whole thing is scaring me. Every time on the road, I see the motorcycle folks, and I'm just like, how are they doing this? Aren't they hot in all those clothes? But how are they doing this? Aren't they getting bugs in their face? Like, I'm just constantly thinking, what's going on with them?
I know.
Anyway, I love that you noticed that the community was really important for your joy.
It was. They kind of reflected somebody back to me that I'd never seen before, And this is this. I didn't really have a role model. Nobody said to me, let's go ride a bike in my 30s. It was a completely different world. But a lot of people that ride bikes they're kind of experiential people. They are in the world. They enjoy the environment because they're in the environment as they move through it rather than behind a glass screen. They enjoy the environment. They're open-minded because many of us, we tour across countries and continents. So you become very aware of other cultures and other ways of doing things. And being on a bike gives you a lot of time to really think about the important stuff. It's kind of, I find that it brings up the big questions, what is it? What's the meaning of life kind of questions.
Wow.
When I was exposed to these people, suddenly I felt, I've got some burning questions, and there's somebody else who cares as much as about that question as I do. What is the meaning of life? And I found more people that liked nature and the stars. And another thing, when I was a kid, I had a telescope, the age of 8 sort of thing. So I have to get another one again. Yeah, of course. Anyways, I'd love to talk about that.
It says the woman who showed me some fossilized dinosaur poop just before we started recording. And of course, we're talking about meteorites, and we're super excited. We're having a little nerd fest over here. Right?
Oh, we were. It was fantastic. It still is fantastic. But yeah, so it's just, I found people, and the word tribe is kind of used quite a lot, but I just found mates, that I could relate to and who related to me, who looked into me, and then I could look into them. And it was just a wonderful thing that I didn't even know was missing in my life. Finding people that are with your wavelength. It's like, you, Susie, I can talk to you all day long because we have so much in common. And there'll be little things that you'll hit on that I hadn't even thought about, but the little threads that you leave when you say something to me. I read a little note down before we started, just you give me a little part, a thread to pick up and move towards. And I know with certain amount of certainty that I'm going to enjoy where a talk with you will take me.
Oh,
and
my
I guess
gosh.
your listeners
That's
are
the
probably
beauty.
thinking the same.
I am. I'm like, how am I going to hang out with Louisa? Because I'm not getting on a
Yeah.
bike. I know you think I might, but I don't know about that.
We can go star watching or something.
That we can do. That we can do. Well, thank you for those kind words. Now, another thing that popped out in your notes before our call, and I highlighted them, was that you noted two feelings that you had about this process. So at first, you felt guilty because it would change everything, your relationships, your identity as a worker, your home life, all of that. Like this was really putting yourself first. And for so many of us midlife gals, super hard. Like we say the words, oh yes, we're going to start putting ourselves first in midlife. So hard to do. It can be so challenging. It can feel so indulgent. And you noted that you felt guilty. But then after that trip, you felt motivated and you had confidence that that was the right direction for you. So I'm so delighted that you didn't stop because you felt guilty.
I'll be honest, I nearly did, right? Because nobody likes this feeling of guilt. Nobody likes to feel like they're putting themselves first, especially not, when we've got families, and that's just so not us. We've spent our lifetime putting other people first. And this is where the community helped me and supported me. So I want to make sure your listeners understand that, they're going through this and they're going through a dip, or they've tried something, they liked it, but now they think, oh, it's too much. You will go through these peaks and troughs. But if you have good people around you, they can help you. And in my case, it was a guy called Spider who was on that first trip with me, who happened to live in England. And he rang me up after that trip, a couple of months after, and said, look, do you want to go for a bike ride? I said, well, actually, I don't have a bike. I think it might be a bit too much for me. And he said, well, why don't you just come to the bike show with me? So I said, all right. So we went to the bike show, and all of a sudden I was amongst all of these beautiful people, all these beautiful bikes. And I thought, I'm going to get myself an Indian Scout, just like the one I rode. Yeah. So I did. And then my mate just was so supportive, took me out on rides and helped me get rid of my fear. Well, at least reduce it, because I was afraid. And he tells me to this day, hilarious it was, that I wouldn't go over 50 miles an hour on our motorway or our freeway because I was too scared of speed at the time. I went through a whole barrage of fears. I went through the fear of stopping, a fear of turning a corner. I went through a fear of even just holding the bike up. But the community, these people just said, just keep going one day, one step at a time. And that kind of helped me get back on track, because I could so easily have just come home, sat, looked at the four walls and thought, that was great, but it's not for me, is it? Because it's just too difficult. But I was lifted up by people. And this is why it's so important,
Yes, it really.
No one's alone. Yeah, you know, the motorcycling community is so good like that. They lift you up.
I love hearing this. And I have a feeling that for many listeners today, this is something we're not familiar with. This is a community that a lot of midlife gals, probably aren't that familiar with. But I'm looking at your notes, and I know I've had you for a while now. I just want to get to a couple more things before I let you go. But, there's something else on here that's jumping out. And of course, I do want to talk about your book. So we'll do that right after. So now you're a published author, and you're riding a motorcycle regularly, I would imagine, and consider yourself a rider. And you're a record-breaking power lifter. Come on now. Louisa,
oh, yeah,
what
that little thing.
Where did that come? Where'd that come from?
Well, I guess that was just this need to challenge myself now. This is an adventure in what can I become rather than what can I do? And I looked at myself and I thought, this is probably 2 years ago now, and I thought, I've always had this silly idea that if you can get 1% fitter each year, in 10 years' time, you'll be fitter than you were 10 years ago. And I thought, it's now or never, right? I'm in my mid-50s, 56 at the time, I guess. And I've always liked to be, I've always moved in my body. I've always been, enjoyed moving through the world in my body. I was never a gym bunny and I never went to the gym regularly. But, if there was a big boulder to shift while we were in the garden, I'd shift it. But I never, I'm just like, there's that, I like to be physical. I like to use my body while it's there. And I thought, what, it's not going to be around for long. What's your next big adventure, Lou? And I thought, there's two things that are calling me. One is method acting, which I thought would be a real interesting exploration into who we really are.
Oh
and
gosh,
the other was
listen to your dreams. There's something.
I know. I'm terrible, aren't I?
No,
the other one was
fascinating.
It was can I get myself in the best shape of my life? And being goal oriented, I thought, I what can I do? I quite like lifting weights, so I'm going to be a power lifter. And I set myself a goal to get myself competing at a professional level within 2 years and to attend the British powerlifting competition.
Of course.
And then I just told my coach, and from then on, she just set me on track. And I tell you, like so many of these things I take on, they're a lot harder than I thought it would be. In terms of diet and routine, and obviously, all my little guilty pleasures, the chocolates and the wine had to go. And I think my experience of overcoming fear on the motorcycle helped. And it created a kind of determination in me to succeed. Also because I had a story to tell others. So a lot of what's happened to me in the motorcycling, and I got to do some racing, some speed racing. I wanted to achieve that not just for myself. It's a great thing to know you're capable of that. But I knew I wanted to tell that story to others as soon as I got the opportunity to race. And the same with the powerlifting. This is a story. This is a story of what can be done. You take someone who I haven't got a privileged background, and I've not ridden a bike. I didn't ride a bike for many, many decades. I don't have a sports background. Can you take somebody who's pretty average in those ways, and can you make something of your life in your 50s? And I thought, I want to show that you can. And that got me out of bed on days I really, really didn't want to. That got me being careful with my diet. That got me in the car and focused. And I managed to do it. I got myself a medal, 2 medals this year. I got myself a record for deadlift in the Welsh Championships and a silver medal at the British one. So, it is not impossible to do these things. And this is now my purpose isn't to go fast on a bike, and it isn't to lift heavier weights. It's to tell this story. And that's why I wrote my book, because I wanted to show people what is possible from a standing start if you have the right people and the right mindset, and to believe that you can do it above all, because self-belief is the key. Your mind
there's one thing you didn't mention here. What's this about the UK land speed record?
Oh, that, yes.
That little thing. Yeah.
Oh, that little thing. So one other thing that I recognized once I got all this help from people was how good it felt to have people believe in you and support you. And I wanted to give that back. And I wanted to do it in a way that I could incorporate my love of motorcycling by this time. So I joined some voluntary organizations. I did some blood biking, which in the UK, and I think there's a little bit around the world, you volunteer yourself and your bike to transport blood products from one hospital to another to help. Yeah, it's basically to help the national health system here, who are pretty underfunded. So what we do as volunteers is, you'd have the training and everything, but you'd get blood to emergency cases. Sometimes somebody has a blood type and they don't have enough blood for them, sort of thing. So I did a bit of that, and it felt so good to give back. I helped with organizations that help paraplegics get back on motorcycles because they had adapted the bikes. And that was amazing. You saw people who were told they could never ride again. Wow. And then they questioned everything they could ever do again. And it was through this that I joined a women's organization called the Women Riders World Relay. So that again, Women Riders World Relay. And that was in 2019. And this was an initiative to pass a baton all the way around the world from woman rider to woman rider. Because there's not the industry doesn't realize just how many of us there are. And this was a real push to recognize women. And thousands of women turned up. And I got involved because the women coordinating a country were called ambassadors. And last minute, one of the ambassadors was unable to fulfill the role. And this was Italian ambassador. So I said I'd do it. I'd help out. And through that, I met a lady whose partner had built a bike to take and speed race at Bonneville. And my heart just leapt. What an adventure that would be. Over a couple of glasses of wine, I found out that basically there was an opportunity for me to join that team, which I got. And then I realized I had absolutely no experience in riding a bike fast. I had no experience even sitting on a sports bike. And that's when the community helped me again. And I was told, why don't you try and practice on sand first? It's the nearest thing to salt. And I found out that there was a land speed meeting in a beach in Wales, which is actually coincidentally not far from where I live now. And on this beach, it's been going for 100 years, you would practice and we would try and set land speed records. I went and practiced. And again, it just took time and it just took me going again and again and again over a weekend. I bought myself a secondhand bike. Again, it was only meant to last me the weekend, to be honest, just to practice for Bonneville. And I managed to stay on the bike. And every time I went, a little bit faster, a little bit faster. So that was my experience in going fast. I went to Bonneville, managed to do a run on Bonneville. But when I came back, I went back to the sand. And that's when I became the fastest woman on two wheels on sand.
Okay, Louisa, what does that mean? How fast are you? Like, I don't have a clue, but I'm like, again, I'm in shock about what I'm hearing here. You were afraid of speed.
I know. 18 months before, I was afraid of speed. And somehow I had to face that fear, which I did through practice, through normalizing it, through visualizing, and through not listening to that voice in my head. You know, fear is, and I talk a lot about this in the book, fear is a messenger. You know, it's telling you to sit up and pay attention. It doesn't mean don't do this. It means do it, but with awareness. And my awareness was do as much as you can, practice, skill up, learn from people better than you. And that brought my fear down just enough so that I could cross that barrier.
So how fast are we talking?
So for the sand record, it's 145. But I've been fast. I've been 205 on tarmac. But sand is quite a difficult medium because of the grains, the back wheel will slip. So you don't get the same sort of speed as you would on tarmac.
Are you talking about miles per hour?
Oh, yes, miles per hour. Yes. Yeah.
And so you, as just a humanoid, is on a bike that's going over 200 miles an hour?
Yes. On tarmac on that one. Yeah. It's pretty scary, actually. But
I'm scared talking about it. Like if my chair is still, right? I'm just sitting here, right?
There was a point where I was at the beginning of those runs where I did a deal with myself and I just said, this is it. This is your life. You have to accept now. You've done all the due diligence. You've done your best to learn to mitigate any potential problems. We never know. Life is full of surprises. This is your moment. And this is, if you can do this, just think what a story you'll have to tell people.
And this
And
record
that was
when
it.
you were over 50 when you set this record.
Yeah. So I was, it was 2019, and I must have been 52, something like that.
And the
Yeah,
powerlifting,
52.
how old were
That
you?
was 57. That was this year. Yeah.
And the book, when did you
And the
write
books,
this book?
that was this year as well, in August.
There you go. Louisa,
Yeah.
how can we get a hold of this book? The Stoic Writer, Philosophy in Motion.
Yes, you can. The easiest way is Amazon. But if you ask a bookshop, they can order it in for you if you don't like to use Amazon. Barnes and Noble. Or if you just go to my website, you can just contact me that way. My website is just www.existentialbiker.com.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
I just want to read just a little bit from the back cover or from the promo. It says, "This isn't just a book about riding. It's a book about choosing your line, embracing change, and living with courage, even when the road is rough. I wrote this for you, the rider, the seeker, the one who's quietly wondered if maybe there's another way to meet life, not harder, not faster, but wiser."
Oh, that pretty much sums it up.
Oh my gosh, you're amazing. I have enjoyed this conversation so much. And I really encourage listeners to grab this book. I'm absolutely grabbing this book. I wasn't sure before I met you. I'm like, is it about motorcycle? What am I going to get from this book? I'm going to get so much from this book. And I think we all will. It's amazing.
Yes.
Lisa, thank you so much. You're awesome.
Oh, you're welcome.
And
you're
you're
welcome.
really putting your money where your mouth is, right? Like you're thinking about what it is you want. You're finding your thoughts. This is what I teach. Find your thoughts, understand what it is you want. And then the biggie is to nurture your commitment to yourself.
Yeah, right on. That's exactly right.
On, sister friend.
And, and the one thing the thread throughout the book, which is pretty much a Stoic philosophy with the writing, is about how precious your life is, how precious your time is, and how, we often think that it's infinite. And yet you and I both know from losing people very young that change can happen in a moment, and it can all change everything. So seize this day, seize this opportunity, seize this life, your one precious life.
Absolutely. That's a beautiful place to end our interview. Louisa, I can't wait to meet you someday in person. It's going to be so
Let's do it.
Thanks so much for your time. That's it for this episode. So, talk about overcoming fear and living a braver life after 50. My goodness. Every time Louisa shared another idea she had, I was shocked at how large her dreams were. She wasn't only shooting high, but to me, with all of my fear, they kind of felt beyond possibility to me. And yet, they weren't. She overcame her own fear time and time again and went for it. I found her story incredibly inspirational. You won't catch me on a motorcycle riding cross country or powerlifting or setting land speed records, however, but I feel so grateful that I had a chance to meet her and be inspired by her story. What will you think about differently now that you've met Louisa too? I'm going to leave you with that question, and I really encourage you to think about it. If fear is calling the decision-making shots in your life, are you okay with that? Or is it time for a change? On that note, I want to make sure that you know how I can help you. If you would like support so that you can stop circling around clarity and start leading your life with intention, you gotta book your free autopilot audit at www.talktosusie.com. As a master certified life coach and midlife mentor, I offer coaching that is uniquely relevant to women our age in their 50s and 60s. And I have been working with women like you now for over 10 years. I have several options that include both private and group coaching at different price points and length of commitment that might be a good fit for you, especially my signature program, the Women in the Middle Academy. Clients have shared that doing this work together can feel like the gift that keeps on giving, because it helps you stop living on autopilot so that you can lead your next chapter on purpose. The clarity, empowerment, and fulfillment you experience is absolutely life-changing. I have a feeling that your future self will love you for this too. So thanks so much for listening to the Women in the Middle show. Please remember to share it with your friends and other midlife gals you know would get a lot out of it. My focus is to help you get unstuck and get on with the good stuff. Being the queen of your brain domain really is the best way to be. It's time to stop waiting for the right moment and start creating the happiness, excitement, joy, and fulfillment that you crave. I know you're craving it. So remember, if you want to doodle your way to midlife calm, head over to www.doodlethink.com. For show notes and links, go to susierosenstein.com and click on the podcast tab and look for episode 448. And you'll see a link there for my other show, The Women in the Middle Entrepreneurs, which is all about the reality of running your business when you're a midlife gal. It's also on iTunes, Spotify, and all the podcast places. Let's do this, ladies. It's time for you to put yourself first, one thought at a time. Thanks so much for listening, and I'll talk to you next week.